Welcome to Conversations at the Well. I'm Kim Pino, and every week my daughter Caroline and I discuss life's issues in a multi-generational, Bible-centered conversation. Our goal is to connect women of all ages and backgrounds to Jesus, the living water, and to each other. If you're looking for a place to be refreshed in a world that seems to be running dry of truth, you've come to the right place. So pull up a chair, have a seat, and join the conversation. Welcome to Conversations at the Well. So glad that you have joined us today for this episode. I'm flying solo without my co-host Caroline here today, but I'm not completely solo because I am having just such a privilege to reconnect with our guest who I have not seen in person in a long, long time. But I know that her story is going to touch your heart, and I'm so grateful that she is here to join in this conversation. So I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself, her family, what she does. So Andrea, thanks for being here, and tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's always so fun when you get to tell your story, but it's more fun when you tell your story to a friend and that you really get to see, what the Lord, how other people view your story, kind of through their eyes. So this is kind of fun. My name is Andrea. I have lived in Dallas my entire life. I am born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I have been married to Joe for 16 and a half years. We have 3 kids. Ella is our oldest. She's almost 15. Then William, who is our middle, but by far our biggest, is 13. And then Jonathan blended up at the end at 10. And we live less than 2 miles from my childhood home. The kids are going through the same school system that I went through. Ella is at the same high school I graduated from. And we have been at the same church our entire marriage here in Dallas, and have just really put down some really deep roots here so that, and it's one of those things where the Lord just knew, like, put down some roots because you're going to need some stability. And Ella, our oldest, is handicapped, and that seems like a lot, but then we have 2 very active boys that keep us very busy and on our toes. So we are active in all kinds of things. I work from home. I work for a network marketing company that allows us to have a great income from the house so that we can be available and present for everything. And my husband has just recently decided to go into an entrepreneurship at the laundromat. So he is actually there now. We call it the store or the mat, and he is opening that this year. So we are kind of all over the place, and yet in a really good place.
Well, Andrea and I met many, many years ago in a young married Sunday school class at First Baptist Dallas. And you and Joe were, I think, newly married when we were in there. And we were, oh my gosh, I don't know. I was in the midst of motherhood with 4 kids under the age of 4. So life was really a blur for me there. But I remember just as we were leaving, we had bought a house farther up North Dallas, and trying to get 4 little kids down to church every Sunday morning was just like, I don't know. It was more than we could handle. So we decided to move churches, and we started attending a church that was just closer to where we moved. And I remember right before we left, you and Joe announcing that you were pregnant with your first baby. So that's my last real memory of y'all physically. And so I have followed you and followed your story through your Facebook post and just through mutual friends who, would update. But I have been really blessed by watching your story unfold, just your story with Ella, with your boys, starting your business. And it's real. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about how I see you have approached this part of your life that as a parent, I know none of us expect. And especially not when it's our first child. But you have really approached this and have been very vulnerable and transparent about both the things that are hard and how you find the joy in it. So I wonder if you would just take us through and tell us just a part of your story with Ella, your family. How have you seen God work, and what lessons really has He taken you through to learn?
I think it really starts with kind of what you were saying about we started in a Sunday school class, right? So I announced my pregnancy in a Sunday school class of people that are a few steps ahead of me. that, are already in the toddler and the infant stage. And so like with you and your family, I can watch, oh, this looks like fun. This is my aspiration. This is what I want. And then at the same time, we had mentors, actually my parents' age, that are still teaching our Sunday school class. I would say, like, first is Joe and I got married and immediately joined the church. I was raised up here in kind of the suburbs of Dallas and at a church up here, and that's where we got married. But when we decided to get serious and get married, we joined the church immediately. And I would say God's kind of first step in all of this outside of our salvation was getting us plugged in somewhere that would walk us through what he was about to take us through, but we
Mhm.
didn't know. So when I talk about those roots that were really grounded, is the Lord was like, I need you here planted. And it was only a year and a half between our wedding and Ella being born. I mean, we got pregnant about 9 months after we got married, and then, Ella was about 9 months later. And so we didn't have a whole lot of time, so I felt like our roots weren't deep, but our roots were in good soil. So like that was kind of like our base. Like our baseline was the fact that we were in a Bible believing church that was ready to wrap arms around us, and none of us even knew that we were going to need it yet. And so Ella was born and actually healthy, about 12 hours old, and at the hospital she started getting sick, and they immediately thought she was fatal. And it ended up she had an infection. The infection went to her brain, and it caused subsequent brain damage. The world would say it was a fluke. The world would say, who's liable for this? Where's the malpractice?
Mhm.
Who gets paid on all of these things? Who am I angry at? And I remember as soon as the doctor walked out of our room just to let us know what was that something was wrong, my husband's first response is, let's pray. My first response was, I think they've switched the babies in the nursery and they actually have the wrong baby. Because I was like, we're okay, we're fine. Like that kind of fight or flight. I was like, no, we're everything's fine, nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
And his first reaction was prayer. And so, being in a marriage with someone that their first reaction is prayer in a crisis is really helpful. And so we prayed, and within 12 hours, our Sunday school class had taken over the waiting room. Some of those friends that conventions just that have kind of kept connected were on their faces, on their bellies in the waiting room. We actually have friends that delivered the same day we did, and they said their parents couldn't even get into the waiting room, and all they could hear was out loud prayers. And they were like, "We're praying too. We don't know what we're praying for." They had no idea they were praying for our child. And so I just think the Lord grounded us in a great place so that when the bottom fell out, we didn't fall as far as the world would have had you fall. And we didn't blame. There almost wasn't like a thought of that, like who's at fault here. And the first thought was get her healthy. And so we spent a month in the hospital getting her really healthy. She survived. We had no idea what the long term effects were. So often people, even just this last week, someone said, I have, a daughter, whose baby's in the NICU. What do I tell her? I'm like, tell her not to Google, tell her not to get ahead of herself, tell her she has no idea what the Lord's miracles will look like. But also, even if the Lord doesn't do a miracle like you want on this side of heaven, God's story is still being written. And so that's something that our Sunday school teacher mentor has told me so often over the last almost 15 years now with Ella is God's writing a story. Like you get to be a part of God's story. What part do you want to play? Do you want to play a background part? Do you want to play do you want to be like right in the middle of what God's doing? Do you want to constantly be like the skeptic standing on the side saying this doesn't work? You get to determine what part of the story, but God's writing the story. And so with Ella, we have really chosen not to have fear. I mean, that's a choice. It's not necessarily always our reality, but it's definitely a conscious choice that we have not to be fearful of having more kids. So we weren't fearful of the boys coming. We knew it's what God called us to. Not to be fearful to try new things, not to be fearful to take her to church and to let the church figure out what it looks like to have a special needs ministry. She's fully handicapped. She's fairly nonverbal. She has some words, but I mean, it's kind of like having a almost 15-year-old 7-month-old. There's some babbling that happens, but for the most part, her world just 15 years of like what usually takes maybe a year for most kids. And her brain's just so damaged. But we get to be a part of so many things that the Lord is doing in her life. And we've chosen not to have fear. And another thing that our mentor told us, and the mentor that was minding our Sunday school teacher when we first found out we were pregnant, when they first had their kids, lost a child at the age of 6 in a car wreck. And so I felt like that was the first person, the only person really that could speak into my life, what it could look like to lose a child and what my reaction would be. So staying in the NICU. She's still not out of the woods. And this sweet woman looked over at me and said, never ask why, because no answer this side of heaven will ever be good enough. And I have clung to that of, okay, like at every stage, like, why is she not talking? Why is she not walking? Why is, she's a freshman in high school now. Why does she not have friends like everybody else? Why is she, maybe not going to go to prom? Eventually it'll be, why is she not getting married? It'll be, why, Lord, why her, why this? And just to remember that no answer this side of heaven will ever be good enough. Because if the Lord even said, because I'm going to bring these people to me through prayer and through your story and through her story and through your witness, I would be like, could you pick someone else? Could we do this a different? I got a couple of different ways we could do this.
Yeah.
Let's re-strategize all of these things. And the Lord, if I just trust him and who he is, his good and perfect will, then I have to believe that Ella was designed this way, that it wasn't a fluke of a test. It wasn't a fluke of an infection. The world can call it whatever they want to. The Lord's like, no, no, no. She is exactly the way. Her walk, her talk, her abilities, her inabilities, her joy, which she has such an incredible joy, her sassy little teenager personality. I've created all of those things in her for my purpose. And I just need you to share who I am through her story. I need you to be patient with her, because she's not going to do the things you're going to need her to do the same way the boys would have. And I'm going to teach you a lot about yourself through her.
Yeah.
That's one of the hardest lessons sometimes I will talk to her. This was Saturday, and I said, Ella, you know how to do these things. Why are you choosing not, like, put your arm through the sleeves? Like, you know how to put your arms through the sleeves. Like, let's just move this along. And the Lord's like, really? Really? She knows how to do it, and she's not doing it, huh? You need her to move it along, huh? How's that working for you? And I was like, oh, it's me, isn't it? It's me with you every time.
Yeah.
And she's a lot of lessons, but I think the Lord, he's just so sovereign. He knew. And so it's not a mistake. It's not an accident. It is a deterrent. It definitely is a, cumbersome thing to manage, but we all have something cumbersome to manage. Ella is just very obvious.
Yeah.
So
I love your sense of humor. And I know that life is not all sense of humor, is it? Children are children. When it comes down to it, children are children. And as mothers, there's times of great joy, and then there's times of, oh. And you're doing a series of posts leading up to her 15th birthday through your Facebook account. And I just have been chuckling with delight to see them. The one that you posted, I don't know if it's the most recent one or not, but it's the one that just stands out into my memory, is somebody was asking you, what is the thing you're supposed to love that frustrates you the most? And your expression of your eyes when you just cut, because Ella was sitting on the couch behind you over, and they pan over to her. I have to tell you how sweet that is. And what I think that is I think that right there is encouragement to every mother, because I thought, oh my goodness, that would be me too. That would so be me. The thing I'm supposed to love the most that frustrates me on any given day, which of my 4 is it? But you have not, my perception, you can tell me if I'm wrong. You have not allowed this very different situation that you were handed with your child make you have a totally different experience of motherhood. What I see you express are the same desires, struggles, hopes, and dreams that I think most mothers have for their children, and watching the challenges that they go through. And then the joys that they do also. Your post of Ella in her cheerleading outfit are so fantastic. What a joy it is to see that and to know, yes, that's an experience she gets to have. But I'm just going to be real honest with you, Andrea. As a mom, what a blessing that God has allowed that to happen. Because we can't help it as mothers. We would not be normal if when those babies were first conceived, we didn't start our own dream, right? It's like, we've got the dream now. Here's the story. Here's the story we're creating. And I, in my own moments, have had to at various stages with each of my kids grieve the fact that the dream I had for them, it's not the reality that they're walking out. So tell me how you've arrived at that in ways. Will you talk a little bit about maybe some of those dreams that you have had for Ella and that you've had to grieve, but where do you see the Lord's hand in that?
I would say the first way I really like, if I preface it, it's the Lord created me to be Ella's mom. So all of my personality traits, all of my humor or my thought patterns, like all of those, He created so intricately in me, knowing I would have Ella. So the fact that I am high emotion, but high work ethic. So we were talking about the Enneagram a little bit earlier. I'm a 4 with a 3 wing. So I'm high emotion. So I have big emotions, which can go good or bad. But I also have a really high like work ethic of like, let's get it done. So for me, it plays out in like, I don't want anyone to think I don't have bad days. I mean, I have sobbing on the floor. There are 15 years of Halloween costumes that don't work well and trick or treating she can't do, which sounds so silly. Christmas performances that don't look great. Family pictures that have never turned out the way I have wanted them to. First day of school looks different. Cheerleading definitely doesn't look like what I thought it would. Our school district has been so gracious, and actually some moms fought really hard for us to have an inclusive cheerleading squad this year. Just this is the first year for it. And it's Ella's freshman year. So for us, it's perfect timing. But for all the moms before me that fought for that and didn't have it, that was a struggle. There are so many times we thought we would still lose her because she had these massive seizures for years that we thought would just take her at any moment, or we wouldn't hear them, or it would just go bad. So I would say allowing myself to feel the feels, highs and lows really deeply, keeps me from stuffing. So not really a stuffer. I'm a full emoter. So I go full emotions, happy, sad, any of those things. And I think allowing yourself to really go, I grieve this, and the word you use is exactly what I use all the time. I grieve the loss of the dream. Like a child wasn't lost, but big dreams were lost, and I'm having to live through that loss every single day, whether it's friendships or just this morning speaking to her speech therapist about communication. Like I've lost 15 years of communicating with her. Like I've never had a conversation with her. And so not a real conversation. If you watch our social media, we have one-sided makeshift faces at each other conversations, but they're not like what you would talk about with your girls when you really get to know them. There's still so many parts of Ella I'll never know. I'll never really know how she feels about everything because she just can't communicate that. And so I grieve those things, especially when they come up. I'll grieve prom. I'll grieve when my friends' kids get married. Like she would get her learner's permit this next year at 15. Like my 10-year-old keeps asking why she can't drive. I wouldn't even allow her to drive a wheelchair. So I'm not sure, but he's completely oblivious. There are so many things over the years, but then I have to find the joy in so much. And for Ella, her personality is joy. So that's a gift the Lord gave us that is not actually very common in special needs kids. Usually they're very frustrated. The communication breakdown is frustrating. Their physical breakdowns are frustrating. Ella, for whatever reason, and truly just a praise, and it's not even, I don't even want to know why. I'm thanking him that she is so joyful. And then I get to find ways to thank him. Lord, thank you that she's here. Lord, thank you that, she has made progress this last few years. Thank you that the seizures are not something that we have to deal with anymore. Thank you for not being on pharmaceutical meds. Thank you for, government assistance that helps us with wheelchairs and therapists and, having someone help us with her because we need somebody to help us when we've got the boys going to basketball and track meets. And so I think the biggest thing, and I'm probably totally swaying from your question, is just feeling the highs of like, this is a win and celebrating that win, but then also being okay sitting on your bathroom floor or in the shower and just crying and saying, this hurts. This grieves my mama heart. This grieves my just earthly heart that I'm having to do this. And honestly, this is just hard. Dressing her, changing her, personal hygiene, things like there are so many things that I'm like, I loathe this. I loathe this task. I loathe that I have to do it for the rest of her life. This is not how this should work. And then she smiles or she laughs or my husband says something or the Lord brings a scripture to mind and I go, it's not about me. And he's teaching me. And I have to just take a deep breath, maybe do something else for a minute and then come back to it. It is not all sunshine and rainbows, but if you stay under that gloomy cloud too long, you can really miss out on so many of the blessings. So it's the balance of both.
So we focused so far in your story on Ella. While she is a huge part of your story, your boys are also an equally big part of your story. Tell me about how you've seen God weave things into their lives that would not be there if their big sister wasn't Ella.
So William, our 13-year-old, is the easiest for me because he is me. And so he is 13 years old, but he is 6'3" and growing. And so he's very tall and long and looks exactly like what you think a basketball player would look like. And with him, he's always been tall. Since he was a baby, he's just been off the charts. And for him, it has been such a lesson in character, and who you are is not your height. So I'm so glad that you're tall. I'm so grateful that the Lord has given you this desire for basketball and this skill for it. That's not who you are, and it's not who you're going to be for the Lord. And I really think like Ella he's so tender with her. He's such a servant with her. Because of her personality, she actually doesn't drive the boys nuts. She can be a little clingy, but that doesn't bother them because they can get up and move and she can't really get to them. So they can have their own space. And when they want her and they want to involve her in their space, they do. And they're really, really, both of them are really patient with her. She doesn't incite, like so many of our special needs friends. And if you're watching this and you have a special needs child who drives their siblings nuts, that is typical. Ella is actually different in the fact of she's so easy. And so it doesn't drive the boys nuts. We really don't let Ella hinder vacations. We try to work vacations around what works for her, but also somewhere the boys would want to go. So that constant balance. She goes to all basketball games. We kind of, poor Ella actually gets drugged to a lot of their things. So we don't let her determine how everything runs around here. I think that has helped because we have stayed at the church we've stayed at for a lot of reasons. But one of them being the special needs ministry that they have grown over the last 15 years and is just so solid for Ella. The boys have stayed in this great Bible believing church that has tons of programs, and have really like dug into the scripture more and more. And I think Ella's not the reason we're at that church, but she's a great, like what they've done with her has definitely helped us stay there. Had they not developed a program for her, I think it would have been hard to stay over all these years. But because they have, the boys are in a great place and a great Sunday school just programs for them. They don't really realize what all the Lord will eventually teach them because of her. I think they're still in just that absorb and go. They're not really aware of anybody else around them. But I do think they were created so specifically for where they place in line. So Ella being first, William is 20 months younger. So by the time Ella was 2, we had a 4-month-old, and Ella was still couldn't even hold her head up. She was practically a newborn. She had no sounds, still practically bottle fed. She was actually tube fed at that time. She had a tube in her stomach, and then William shows up. He walked early, talked early, has always been what you would think about as a typical firstborn. And so he's been such a gift because what she couldn't do, can you go grab your sister a diaper? Can you help me with this? Can you hold the door? And just progressively. And now that he's so tall, which is so funny of the Lord to do, is he's so big, he can balance her. He can walk her. He can do almost any physical thing we need him to do with her. He can lift a wheelchair. He can do all the things that our 10-year-old can't do. So if Will was small and maybe meek bodied, like if he was just like maybe weaker or as small as she is, it would be really hard. But the Lord grew the stature of a man to really help us move along with her. And so, and then Jonathan, I love him, but our sweet 10-year-old is just in his own world. If it does not directly affect him, he does not care. So he will snuggle with her all day long, show her Minecraft and Fortnite and all the things he's playing on devices. But when he stands up, he just walks away, where the older one will converse with her. Our younger one still's quite aware that anybody else exists in the world other than him. So it'll be interesting. We pray for their wives, that their wives will have a heart for her. We pray that the boys will never feel burdened by her. These are like prayers we've had since they were born. They will never feel burdened by her. That the Lord will just show them where they're placed, and where she's to be placed in their lives. There's always that fear that Joe and I, something could happen to us, and then it's the boys and Ella with their caretakers, and that they would never feel burdened to take care of her, but that they will have a heart for her as she gets older, whatever that looks like, whether she's in a home, in a residential home, or if she's in a special needs home, and that the boys will just never want life to not be with her. And so, but I have to release that to the Lord, because there's nothing I can do to control that at all.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned the mentor in your life who's been there. I'm going to say her name, Marian Ashwell, because she was, oh my gosh, someday maybe I could be just a tiny bit like that woman. Have her grace and her wisdom. I'm so grateful that she and Reed have been there for you all along.
Marian walks me through my life. Like, she literally, like, I have a great mom, but Marian walks me through in a spiritual mentor way. And so she walks me through that day to day. My mom walks me through, just life as a great, mom.
I tell my girls all the time, you can't pour out unless you first are poured into. And then once we're not to keep that for ourselves. I so appreciate your spending this time talking with us today. I know that God is going to continue in your story. He's not done with any of us yet until he calls us and takes us home.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being willing to just let the Spirit lead. You do such a great job of just being available for what the Lord's called you to do, even when you don't always know exactly what that's going to look like each time. And then letting the Spirit lead, and knowing that there is, if even one life is touched, that is really just, grown and cultivated in who Christ is, like, that's what matters. And that's just incredible to see as a ministry.
So thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Conversations at the Well. We hope your soul was refreshed. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know by leaving a review and subscribing on your favorite platform. Right now, this ministry is doing work across borders. If you want to find out how to get more connected with the Well, visit the link in our bio or check us out on Instagram at Well Women's Ministry. Make sure to join us again for the next Conversation at the Well.